Paul, how are you today?
I'm so much better for seeing a copy of Mortal Kombat in the background.
Good eye. See, I thought it would be a good idea to put it back there, and it paid off. I was going to gush a little right off the bat, anyways, and tell you the story of a teenaged Mike Johnson. That film was released on DVD the fall following the release of Mortal Kombat that summer. And I was sick one day, rented that film, and probably watched it about 8 times in a row. So your early 90s or mid 90s work definitely influenced my teenage years. So thank you for that. You also notice kind of the physical media collection behind me, and it's interesting that we're here talking about Event Horizon because it's a perfect example of a film getting a second life because of VHS, DVD, and now the 4K release. So do you think Event Horizon would it become a cult film in today's world of streaming?
That's a very interesting question. I think there's an intensity to Event Horizon that really developing an audience over time. It really suited that intensity because it's not for everybody. It's one of those movies that I think if it went straight out onto streaming, I think it would draw a certain audience, but then there would be another audience that would never ever watch it. And I think over time, word of mouth has kind of spread, and people said, "Oh, you should check this movie out." And a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily go for a science fiction horror movie have kind of seen the film and been affected by it, which I think is good. So I think, to answer your question, I think Event Horizon really benefited from DVD in particular. I think judging from how many reissues there were of the movie and how many different box covers and stuff, Paramount have really embraced the kind of DVD aspect of the movie.
I had the pleasure of interviewing Jason Isaacs last year, who was in, I believe, 3 out of your first 4 films. And he said what he admires the most about you, because we were talking about Soldier, Event Horizon, the fact that you are just purely optimistic. And he said it's not about how you deal with failures that defines you, it's how you deal with success. Do you think that's the Anderson model in filmmaking?
Listen, I think being a filmmaker is the best job in the world. It's the only job I ever wanted. I kind of go to work now and I kind of really still can't believe that I get paid for directing movies, for kind of making up these stories and putting them on film. So I'm a very happy camper, and I feel very lucky doing what I'm doing. And I feel if you can't be happy making a movie, you can't be happy. So, and I think in your career, you're always going to have ups and downs. I mean, it's the nature of filmmaking. It's a roller coaster ride. No one stays on top forever. So, Jason's right. It's how you deal with failures and the successes, the peaks of those, of that roller coaster ride that's really important. And I've never let any success go to my head because I've always had friends like Jason who can always deflate me as well. Who, by the way, was in 4 out of the first 4 of my movies, because he also provided the narration at the start of the first Resident Evil movie. And I just remembered now, he's also in the end of the first Resident Evil. He's one of the kind of evil doctors that leans over Milla at the very, very end. So he's kind of at the start and the end of that movie.
Is there a director's cut of Mortal Kombat where he makes a cameo that we should know about as well?
I wish I could have jammed him in there, doing some of the English martial arts.
Right, exactly. There was a point in your career, I think, where you definitely embraced that notion of being an unapologetic filmmaker. The fact that you love your work so much and that you're making the movies that you want to make. Do you think if Event Horizon was made once again in this day and age, would it be a very different film considering you may have evolved as a filmmaker?
I think maybe it would be hard for me to embrace some of the really dark imagery in the film. I'm a father with 3 children now. I was a young man who was just, had a certain darkness within me that I think the movie really allowed to come out. And I'd just done a PG-13 movie with Mortal Kombat. So like doing an R-rated movie, I think I really reveled in it in a way that I'm not quite sure I could kind of revel in it again, exactly like that. So I think, the movie, stylistically and visually probably would be the same. But I think the actual inherent darkness at the center of it might not be as effective as if I tried to do it now. You know, I was very led by a lot of artists. You know, the movie is very, very influenced by the work of Bosch and Bruegel and the photography of Peter Jovovich. That was the imagery that I showed to everybody when we were building the world of the movie. So, you know, the film, you know, on the one hand was a piece of entertainment. It was a mainstream studio movie, but I wanted it to have this kind of artistic influence, as it were. So, you know, that was a big part of it.
That's interesting that you addressed that, because I was going to list off some other filmmakers that really made a name for themselves in the 90s, if you'll bear with me. People like Tarantino, Kevin Smith, Alex Proyas, David Fincher, Spike Lee, Tim Burton, the Wachowski sisters. You could call a lot of those filmmakers unapologetic, but there's also this kind of inherent angst or energy about middle to late 90s filmmaking that I was going to ask, do you find you still have a piece of that 90s energy in your films? Because I find it kind of touches on a lost era of filmmaking with some of your more recent films.
Listen, I'm sure my critics would accuse me of never kind of becoming anything more than juvenile, you know, so there's definitely still the heart of a 13-year-old boy beating inside of me going, oh, that's so cool. I would love to see that in a movie. And, you know, that to me is my guiding light. You know, if I think it's cool, you know, then I'll put it in the film. So, I mean, I think that energy is, you know, yeah, I would definitely say it's still kind of like burning away inside of me.
I'm glad we have just a couple minutes left, because I've finished asking about Event Horizon, so I can geek out about Mortal Kombat a little bit more. I still consider that to be, I'd say, the strongest adaptation of a video game property to this day. The fact is, it was so true to the property, and I think that's why it's a perennial film in a lot of ways, despite perhaps, you know, the visual effects kind of being outdated and things like that. It's interesting that a lot of your films, despite what you had said about critics perhaps calling your films juvenile, how character-based they truly are. So how do you address that as a filmmaker when you have something as bombastic as Resident Evil or Mortal Kombat, and yet it still remains kind of a character-driven story? How do you balance that?
A lot of people I found, you know, really disregard video games, especially when I was doing Mortal Kombat. They're like, well, how do you turn that into a movie? You know, it's just a bunch of people hitting one another and ripping their spinal columns out. And, you know, because I played Mortal Kombat in all these arcades, I knew that there were some great characters. You know, maybe they weren't that, you know, they weren't developed in a kind of Shakespearean way or in a way that you get in a novel. But, you know, these were fun, relatable characters. And I think that's important to kind of have relatable characters in your movies. And it's also important for them to be fun. And I think that's what a lot of people forget in video game adaptations is that's why people play video games, is to have fun. No one kind of plays a video game to kind of have their nose kind of like ground in the bleakness of life, or kind of, it's a fun experience. And that's always been my approach as well, is to kind of take what's best about the characters and about the games and try and enhance that kind of fun experience in the cinema.
Well, Paul, promise me that in a few years when Mortal Kombat celebrates its 30th anniversary, you and I can chat again, because I'd love to have a big chat about that one. So
I would love to talk about it.
That'd be great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, and best of luck with the re-release of this film.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Real students, thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe to Real School, click that round Real School logo right beside me. Also, click that damn notification bell so you're aware of all of Real School's new content. You can follow me on Twitter, and of course, if you get anything out of Real School, you can always give a little back. Just click the link in the description below or the button down there, and you can become part of my Patreon team.